Joey Heatherton was a sex symbol of the 1960s, who often is compared to Ann-Margaret. She was all over the airwaves, magazine covers, and talk shows for a time. Joey was quite the sought-after singer, dancer, actress, and personality, and she was featured in programs like The Dean Martin Show and The Mike Douglas Show. Despite her ubiquitous presence back then, entertaining the troops in Vietnam with Bob Hope and all that jazz, you don't see her working at all anymore. She was born Davenie Johanna Heatherton in New York City and raised in Rockville Centre, New York, to a pair of performers. Her father, Ray Heatherton, was a Broadway star and television pioneer who achieved a measure of fame in the greater New York area as the star of the long-running children's show The Merry Mailman. Her mother, Davenie, whom she was named after, was a dancer who met Ray when they were both performing in a production of Babes in Arms. She was nicknamed Joey as a child, a combination of her first name Davenie and her middle name Johanna. As a child, she attended St. Agnes Academy, a Catholic grade in high school. At age 6, she started studying ballet at the Dixon McAfee School of Dance before going on to study for another 4 years under the late great George Balanchine. She studied modern jazz, dance, voice, and dramatics. Heatherton was blessed with an almost preternatural glow that people in the industry like to call star power. Today, you'd probably say she had the it factor. She spent the majority of the 60s and 70s dancing on TV shows, performing for the armed forces, and making appearances on red carpets looking glamorous, distinguished, and always put together. But as the decades went on, she was cursed with scandal after scandal and slowly started to drift out of the public eye. She drove men wild in the 1960s. Heatherton has been a performer since she was a little girl, but her first notable role was on a 1960 episode of Route 66 when she guest starred as a rich brat with what's been called a sexy kid look, whatever that's supposed to mean. From there, she started dancing on shows like Hullabaloo and The Tonight Show, where she famously taught Johnny Carson how to do a dance called the Frug. Her critics deemed her sensual demeanor and look as sleazy eroticism, and she was constantly haunted by the pervasive critique that she was a kind of Ann-Margaret knockoff. But that didn't stop her from earning fans who couldn't get enough of her. Keep in mind, Heatherton wasn't just a saucy, sexy dancer on late night. She was also a fairly decent actress, who guest starred on shows like The Virginian and I Spy. Her biggest television break came in the summer of 1968 when she co-hosted Dean Martin Presents The Gold Diggers with Frank Sinatra Jr. For a little while, it seemed like everywhere you looked, there was Joey Heatherton's distinct come-hither gaze and curvaceous figure. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like, and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. And stick around to see why the 80s were so damaging to Joey Heatherton's once illustrious career. She put her life on the line during her USO tours. Even though she was regularly taking on guest roles and dancing on whatever show she desired to, Heatherton also enjoyed spending her time entertaining the troops during the Vietnam War. From 1965 to 77, she performed with Bob Hope's renowned USO troupe, where she showed off her many talents by singing, dancing, and hanging out with the brave boys overseas. While in Vietnam, she'd perform on a makeshift stage while simultaneously putting her life on the line to give the troops a much-needed reprieve from the war. During one such trip to Da Nang, Heatherton barely managed to survive an enemy assault while on stage. She had to be airlifted to safety via a helicopter. She was then taken to a plane, and before she knew it, she was safely in the Philippines, still covered in mud from her daring escape from the Viet Cong's unexpected attack. That didn't stop Heatherton from continuing to perform for the troops, though she later admitted the constant threat of danger definitely freaked her and her fellow performers out a bit. But she continued doing what she loved without hesitation. She continued to branch out in the 1970s. After spending nearly a decade performing on TV, Heatherton started taking on different kinds of projects in the 70s. She appeared in numerous TV ads for products like RC Cola and Serta mattresses while performing regularly in Las Vegas. 1972 in particular was a pretty big year for her. That was the year she dropped her debut LP, the Joey Heatherton album, while appearing in the major motion picture Bluebeard alongside Richard Burton, Raquel Welch, and Sybil Danning. She didn't have a lot of luck with the film, which is likely why she isn't well known today like many of her contemporaries. Despite appearing in various films since 1963's Twilight of Honor, she was never quite able to secure a role in the kind of film that stood the test of time. Her most famous film credit might have been as Xaviera Hollander in The Happy Hooker Goes to Washington in 1977. 2 singles from her debut album charted on the Billboard Hot 100. One was a cover of the Ferlin Husky track Gone, and the other was an original titled I'm Sorry. A few years later, Heatherton's father hosted the midsummer replacement TV series Joey and Dad, a variety show that featured the two performing together while her dad mused about his life. Even though she was only in the second decade of her career, Heatherton was already starting to look back on her life with nostalgia and a twinge of regret. By the late 70s, Joey's career was already waning. Following her nasty divorce from Lance Rensel, the wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys, in 1972, Heatherton began her slow departure from the public eye. She briefly hosted Joey and Dad for 4 weeks in 1975, then Happy Hooker came out in 77, but after that she pretty much stopped acting. In the mid-80s, she briefly returned to the public eye, but for the wrong reasons. She was arrested several times for a slew of minor offenses, ranging from skipping out on her hotel bill to assaulting a clerk at a U.S. passport agency office in Manhattan. But the most outrageous and out-of-character moment of her life happened in 1986 at the home of her drummer, Jerry Fisher. The 80s were nothing but trouble for Heatherton. Depending on who you ask, Jerry Fisher was either Joey's boyfriend, manager, or just a trusted confidant. But a shocking report from the Milwaukee Sentinel from September 1986 cast their relationship in a very different light. If he was her drummer before that ill-fated evening, he more than likely was her ex-drummer after. Heatherton was arrested and charged with stabbing Fisher in the hand with a serrated steak knife while at his home in Suffern, New York. She was also slapped with a possession charge for having cocaine on her person at the time of the arrest. Fisher decided to ultimately not pursue charges against Heatherton, so both charges were inevitably dropped. John Waters helped Heatherton stage a return to the big screen. John Waters, aka the Pope of Sleaze, has always had a special place in his heart for stars from the 60s and 70s. In 1990, Heatherton made a brief appearance in the film Cry Baby, Waters' ode to rockabilly music, and those teen crime wave films of the 50s. She played a religious fanatic and was dressed so modestly it's almost easy to mistake her for someone else. The 90s proved Heatherton was all but finished with the media. In 1997, at 53, she posed nude for the April issue of Playboy. Just like anyone else, Heatherton's life and career had its ups and downs. And sure, she had a couple of run-ins with the long arm of the law, but who hasn't? Now it's time to hear from you. In the comments section below, let us know what your favorite memory of Joey Heatherton was. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.